how to add fabric to flat objects, because one of the limitations of Fusion is that it doesn't actually render fabrics that well because of various reasons, but I'll show you what it looks like. So I've just got this radio here that I've just made. Not now, I've done it a while ago, but so let's say I wanted this to be fabric. Normally what you'd do in Fusion is go to your appearance and then either search for fabric or find it in the drop down, and you drag it on. Now that doesn't look too bad initially because it's not been rendered, but I've noticed a few things. So one, it looks quite flat to begin with, and two, if we zoom in, you can see that these textures don't quite line up, so that will make the render look off. It won't look right, and there's no imperfections in the fabric. It's really straight. Now in real life, no fabric is that straight, so that's something else that would throw you off when you were looking at the render. It would kind of look a bit weird, but if you didn't do rendering, you wouldn't really know what it was that was looked quite weird, but you could tell something was off. So these things add up. So one way to change it is if we go to texture map controls, and then why is it not letting me do it? Try that. Oh, okay, that's weird. Anyway, I'll show you on here. So I've just created a sphere and I've added the fabric in the same way that I have to the radio. Now you can see that if I just move around, you can see that the fabric, it doesn't look too bad here on the left, but again you've got these weird seam lines, and then you've got this. Now this is happening because of the way it's projecting this fabric onto the sphere. Now obviously because you can't wrap fabric around a 3D object that well in real life, Fusion's just tried to apply an image over the sphere in one direction. So if we go here and it's working in here. So if we just click on the sphere and we change it to UV, we can see how Fusion's actually applied the image to the object. Now it is on automatic by default, but for different objects you can change it to planar. So it's going to apply it from one side, and you can see these lines represent the direction the fabric is going in. We can change it to box, so it's going to apply that direction, top and bottom, and obviously on the other sides, and you can see that in the circles. You can apply a sphere, which is going to do the same thing as what it did before, which is just you've got this weird artifact at the top and then it doesn't look too bad here. Or you can change it to cylinder. That's pretty much the same as some of the others. But you can see if we come off and go back into appearance, you can see that the mapping is really strange. Like you've got these weird jagged edges, which isn't great. Now you can't really get around that in Fusion. That's one of the limitations. You would take this into another program like Blender or Keyshot to try and remap the UV, so then when an image or a texture is applied like the fabric, it will look a lot more realistic. So that's one of the limitations. But for something like the radio, even if we were to apply a planar map to it, because it's a flat object, it would work quite well, but you would still get you wouldn't have any imperfections on the fabric and it wouldn't look great. So I've just rendered, to change the color of that, if you didn't like grey, you could just double click on it, click advanced, make that bigger, and then go down to here and then change it to color. I think it is like a dark blue. That'll do. Click OK. Now that was pretty close to what I wanted it, so that's fine. So click apply. Now if I was to render that here, and we zoom in, you can see it doesn't look too bad from a distance, but as soon as you zoom in, it looks weird because there's no imperfections and this mapping is not right. So if you were to print this quite large, for example for like a trade show or an advert or something like that, it wouldn't look great. So what we can do is if we just go back to that color and we would just render that and then save that to our desktop. And then if we were to open Photoshop, so this is one of the old renders that I had, what we can do is we can grab a fabric texture from the internet. Let's just say this one for now. And then what we can do is if we right click and click distort, this allows us to pull the corners of the fabric. So what we're going to do is we're going to match the fabric to the perspective of the radio. Now when you click distort, sometimes it will only let you go up or down or left and right, but if you hold the shift button you can move it around like that, and that makes your life a lot easier. So if we just move down, hit shift, and then I'll just drag that here, do that again, drag them down, and then drag these corners up. Now we want to cover the blue part that we want to be the fabric, we just want to completely cover that. So we're getting there now, and then if I drag this down again, see this line we want to just slightly come over the edge of the blue part that we want to cover, and the same for the bottom. I'm going to match the top line to the top part of the radio there, and then got the same again at top. Right, so we just click enter and zoom out. Now the perspective lines here match. Now what's important is these lines here, the top and bottom, also match the direction in which the radio is going. So if we draw a line to kind of go in that way and then that way. So if we just go back to here and just double check that that seems to be roughly right. That'll do for now, so we hit enter. Now what we can do is we can use blend modes. So what these modes allow you to do is change the way that this image interacts with the layer beneath it. So if we go on screen, you can see it's going to get rid of all of the dark areas, and if we go into overlay, it's going to get rid of all the light areas. Now this will heavily depend on the type of fabric you've got and or image, sorry, and what's behind it. There's no one right blending mode to use, but what I found with fabrics is soft light tends to work the best. So if we just hit that, we can see that's looking a lot better now. But the issue we've got is you can see the fabric is coming over the plastic dials. Ooh. And it's also coming off over the edge of the radio. So if we just hide that for a minute, and then we've got click our background layer, hit Command J to duplicate it, and then we come over to here, which is the quick selection tool. What we can do is if we hit the right square bracket on your keyboard, you can make it bigger or smaller, and then we just want to select everything that's within the part that we want to keep. Now that looks fine for now. Obviously you can go in and spend a little bit more time going around these edges. You see it's caught the white bit here, but if you spend a bit more time you could just hit the minus button up at the top and make it smaller, and then slowly just click with the very edge of the brush just to remove that. But for time now I'm just going to leave that. So what we can do is we can hit this button here, which is going to mask. So when we hit that, if you hold Alt and click that, you can see the mask. So everything that was selected is white, so white reveals and black conceals. So everything that's black in this image now will be hidden, whatever layer it's on. So if we turn that layer back on and then just drag that to that layer, we can see, if I just disable it, that was what we had before, and now this mask is masking off everything that was black, which is then hiding these edges that we didn't want, and it looks quite nice. But you can see again we've got an issue with the fabric coming up over the plastic because I didn't make the selection good enough. But there's an easy way to fix that. So if you hit B on the keyboard, B for brush, and make it bigger, and then we just make sure the hardness is about 50%. We can draw in, make sure you've got a black brush. You can paint over there, and you're going to paint black onto the mask, so that's going to hide that part of the layer. So if we go back to the mask, you can see this is where I've painted. That's all I'm doing. And I'm just painting out the parts of the fabric that we don't want on the plastic. Now let's go around. Obviously you can spend a lot more time on this. There we are. So we can see that looks a lot better than what Fusion was producing, because one, it's not perfect, but it is wrapping around the edges slightly because it's blended with the image below, and we've got imperfections in the fabric which you can see make this render look a lot more realistic. And so that's one way of doing it. Now this works well for flat planes like I have here, because there's no curvature to this apart from the edges going that way. But if you were to have something that was rounded, what you would have to do is, when you get to this point, disable that. When you're at this stage and you're trying to wrap the fabric to the object, why is that doing that? I'm not sure what's going on. But when you had this selection, you would have to right click and distort. Oh, now it's working. Okay. Sorry, warp. You'd have to warp. Bear with me. I'll have to rasterize this. Okay, so when you're at this stage, before you applied the mask, you'd have to warp the fabric and bend it. So just imagine this is a sheet of paper and you're peeling the edge up. Now what that does is, if you've got a curved object, for example, like a cup or something, or something with that kind of curvature, you can then patiently wrap the fabric around it, or at least make it look like it's wrapped around, and then you'd apply the same technique to mask it off. So that's the best way you can create fabric in Fusion 360.